Good morning. Happy Friday, and welcome to chapter 26 of My Life with the Spirits. Uh, th- I think we're only going to be doing one more of My Life with the Spirits. We're going to probably be finishing it up tomorrow on Saturday. So I'm debating whether or not to read another book. I know some of you would like me to do it, and frankly, I would too. Uh, but most of all, I think I just miss getting together with you every morning at 10. It sort of forces me to pull myself together and clean up and get my wits about me. So I think I will continue to do this every morning at 10 o'clock, and I'll do something. Now, quite a few of you have uh, requested that if I was going to do another book, that you would like me to uh, do the Chicken Kabbalah of Rabbi Lamed Ben Clifford. Now, it is one of my favorite books, and it is really good, if I must say so myself. And I'd be happy to do it. But there's something to think about, because if you're familiar with it, you know that there's lots and lots and lots of diagrams and illustrations and charts and things like that. And if you don't actually own a copy of it, you'd miss out on a lot of that. So I'd be happy to do Chicken Kabbalah, but I'd also have to encourage you to actually own a copy of it, so that as I'm reading along with the narrative part of it, you'd at least have the ability to follow along and see the charts and graphs that I'm talking about. There's an alternative idea too. My novel, Accidental Christ. Now, it reads like a novel, and it's sort of it's a really good book. It's a little blasphemous, but it's a really good book. But it's a novel, and it's in short little chapter bites that would be really good for books on tape or reading something like this. This is the first edition, the hardbound edition, which sold out pretty fast. But it's on Kindle, and you could do that too. So I want you to think about that today. And when we get together tomorrow, I'll try to decide which of those two, or something else that you might suggest that we would be doing at our 10 o'clock meetings during the Fraternal Order of Sequestered Mystics meets every Monday for a while. But today, we're back on My Life with the Spirits, chapter 26, the second to the last chapter. The Attack of Aunt Gladys's Ghost. I'm often asked if I've ever been attacked personally by a spirit. People are disappointed if I can't terrorize them with some tale of spiritual mayhem. Alas, I have to tell you that, with the exception of my first evocation of Orobos, when it was more a case of my own stupidity than the malice of the spirit, I've never been attacked by any spirit that I have formally evoked. I was, however, nearly killed by a spirit that I did not invoke. Now, crime statistics show that if you're going to be murdered, it will most likely be by a family member. This is obviously the case in the spirit world. As you may recall from Chapter 2, my Aunt Gladys lived nearly her entire life in Wallace, Nebraska. Her story is one of tragedy and triumph. Crippled at an early age with a disease that virtually gelatinized her bones, she bravely overcame the harsh cruelties of prairie life to become one of the most beloved and respected matriarchs of her community. She was charming. She was witty. All who came near her immediately found themselves willing slaves to her charisma. Through pure will and strength of character, she transformed her little wheelchair into a throne from which she dictated the lives of all within her gravitational pull. Her favorite servants were little boys, neighbor boys, relatives. It didn't matter. I can't recall ever seeing her without a tiny footman tirelessly running errands, emptying her chamber pot, and doing 1,000 household chores. When they grew older, she allowed them to drive her to the outermost reaches of her queendom. While we were living with her, she even attempted to recruit Mark and me into her service. But years of self-centered laziness made us poor candidates for martyrdom. Please do not misunderstand me. Aunt Gladys was a good woman. She didn't have a malicious gelatinized bone in her body. She did what she had to do, and she did it with great style. Nevertheless, it remains a sad fact that many of the dear souls she dominated docilely allowed their lives and personalities to be drained of any semblance of independence or will. Her little boys eventually grew older, but few, it can be said, grew to manhood. Without her dynamic direction, many of them drifted into lives of tragic loneliness. One summer, about a year before she died, Gladys traveled to California for a visit. Constance suggested that we take her to the Huntington Library and Botanical Gardens in San Marino. I heartily agreed. Since Jean-Paul was old enough to walk, we visited the gardens regularly and pretended we lived there. It is one of the most beautiful places on earth. 144 acres of magnificent grounds, pine forest, Japanese garden, Shakespearean garden, fish and turtle ponds, Greek gardens, massive rose arbors, herb gardens, and the world's most extensive desert garden. It's paradise. And all of it accessible by wheelchair. As we predicted, Gladys loved the Huntington Gardens. It was a thrill just watching her prairie-parched eyes drink in the exotic colors and forms. Jean-Paul was our guide, and I, of course, pushed the wheelchair. Gladys was visibly affected. Several times during the day, she made us stop so she could reach up and hug my neck and tell me it was the happiest day of her life. By afternoon, the temperature reached 103 degrees, and I was beginning to tire. We unwisely saved the desert garden for last. It was located in the lowest section of the grounds, and the way out is an uphill ordeal even when one is not pushing a wheelchair. By the time we reached the parking lot, Jean-Paul and I each suffered a heat stroke. He threw up, and I broke out in a cold sweat, which I couldn't bring under control for several hours. But Gladys was in bliss. It would be the last time I saw her live. We knew Gladys was pleased with her day at the Huntington, but we had no idea just how pleased she was. She called us as soon as she returned to thank us. She cried on the phone. We soon heard from other relatives that it was all she could talk about. She made multiple copies of all the photographs from that day and sent them with detailed descriptions to everyone she knew. She gave me all the credit for the happiest day of her life and told everyone I almost died in the process. After all these years, Lonnie had become her favorite boy. On the night she died, nearly 20 hours before I would learn of her death, Gladys came to me in a frightening vision. I dreamed I was in her old house in Wallace, lying on my back in her great mahogany bed. It was here the dear woman used to let me sit with her for a few minutes at bedtime, and she would read me the funny paper adventures of Dondi and Alley-Oop. This night she was not in bed. She was standing in the doorway of her bedroom, standing upright without a cane or crutches or braces. She slowly walked to the head of the bed. I was so surprised, I said, "Aunt Gladys, you can walk." She didn't say a word, but reached toward me and pulled the pillow from under my head and placed it gently over my face. I tried to push it off, but my hands and arms were paralyzed. I tried to scream, but I could not get any air to come out of my throat. I was suffocating. I tried to thrash my body from side to side, but I couldn't tell whether or not I was really moving. I think I managed to let out an awful groan, but I couldn't articulate any words. I groaned again and struggled against the pillow. I heard Constance's voice telling me, "Breathe, Lon, you're not breathing, wake up." I stared wide-eyed into the pillow until it dissolved, and I saw the familiar shadows of my own bedroom ceiling. Constance pushed me sharply and yelled again for me to breathe. Finally, I found the control to drag in a deep breath and then another. It was a clear case of sleep apnea. It happened before. I snore like Godzilla. This was the first time, however, that it had been accompanied by such a strange and terrifying dream. I dreamed Aunt Gladys was trying to suffocate me with a pillow. Constance and I both laughed. Still, I would not put my head back down on the spot where the dream occurred. I spent the rest of the night on the living room couch. The following evening, my brother called to tell us that Aunt Gladys had died the night before. A few days later, my mother flew to Nebraska for her sister's funeral. She stayed for a week afterward to help Gladys's daughter with the disposition of some of her things. Mom brought back a handful of memorabilia to divide between my brother and me. My inheritance was wrapped in tissue and delivered in a large shopping bag. A lovely card from her daughter accompanied it. She wrote to tell me again that Gladys's trip to the Huntington was the happiest moment of her life, and that she hoped I would always think of her mother whenever I looked at the silken pillow that Gladys hand embroidered just for me. And that's the end of chapter 26. I'll be back tomorrow at the same time, where we'll do chapter 27, How to End an Autobiography Without Dying. Think about what, if any, book you would like me to continue reading in our Monday get-togethers. So until then, be good to yourself. Be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love's the law, love under will. Be safe.